Between two rivers in the cradle of human civilization lies a land that gave the world everything, Iraq. Yeah? This is where writing was invented, where the first cities rose from the plains, where the wheel first turned and laws were first written in stone. From the Sumerians to the Babylonians, from the Assyrians to the Abbasids, empires that shaped human history were born here. This is a land of extremes. The marshes of the south, where the Tigris and Euphrates merge, create wetlands that have sustained life for millennia. The northern mountains of Kurdistan rise over, sun-lopide meters, their peaks crowned with snow. And between them, the Mesopotamian plain stretches endless, holding beneath its soil the ruins of civilizations that ruled the known world. Few other places carry such weight of history. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Library of Ashurbanipal, the world's first systematically organized library. The Code of Hammurabi, humanity's first written legal code. All were here in this land between the rivers. Now where else does the ancient feel so present yet so damaged? Ziggurats still rise from the desert. The ruins of Babylon still stand. Yet decades of war have scarred this land, destroying heritage, scattering populations, and leaving wounds that may take generations to heal. And this is Iraq, the wounded cradle of civilization that still holds stories the world needs to hear. Instead here, Baghdad sits astride the Tigris River, a city that was once the center of the world. In Inhabited RCE, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur founded Baghdad as his capital. He called it Madinat al-Salam, the city of peace. The city was built as a perfect circle, a design unique in Islamic architecture, with 4 gates opening to the 4 corners of the world. Within a century, Baghdad became the largest city on earth, home to perhaps 1 million people. The House of Wisdom, established by Caliph Harun al-Rashid and expanded by his son al-Mamun, became the greatest center of learning in the world. Scholars from across the known world came here. Greek philosophy was translated into Arabic. Indian mathematics, including the concept of zero, was studied and expanded. Astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and geography flourished. The works translated and created in Baghdad's House of Wisdom would later spark the European Renaissance. This was the golden age of Islam, and Baghdad was its shining jewel. The tales of 1001 Nights, though originating elsewhere, were set in Harun al-Rashid's Baghdad, the caliph wandering his city in disguise, encountering merchants, lovers, and thieves. These stories captured the cosmopolitan energy of a city where anything seemed possible. Then came Ichen Erbek Wushirbad. The Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, laid siege to Baghdad. When the city fell, the destruction was total. The House of Wisdom was burned, its books thrown into the Tigris until the river ran black with ink. Scholars were slaughtered. The irrigation systems that had sustained Mesopotamia for millennia were destroyed. Baghdad never fully recovered its former glory. It remained important, passing through Persian, Ottoman, and British hands, but the intellectual light that had illuminated the world was extinguished. Today, Baghdad is a city of over 1 million, Iraq's capital and largest city. The Tigris still flows through its heart, though pollution has darkened its waters. The round city al-Mansur designed is long gone, buried beneath centuries of newer construction. What remains are echoes. The Al-Mustansiriya Madrasa, built in Ichen Garsers, still stands as one of the oldest universities in the world. The Abbasid Palace, though damaged, hints at the grandeur that once was. And throughout the city, mosques with intricate tile work and soaring minarets remind visitors that this was once Islam's greatest city. But Baghdad has known too much war: the Iran-Iraq War in the Ichen-Jobite Bashars, the Gulf War in Chenjubite-Josri, the Arsan-Lingsan invasion, and the chaos that followed. Bombings, sectarian violence, and the occupation by ISIS in nearby areas, the city has endured trauma upon trauma. The famous Mutanabi Street, named after the 6th century poet and historically the center of Baghdad's book trade, was bombed in Arsenlingchi. Over 30 people died among the bookstalls and cafes where intellectuals gathered. Yet it has been rebuilt, and booksellers have returned, a defiant assertion that culture cannot be killed. Walk through Baghdad today and you see resilience. Cafes serving strong tea and backgammon games, markets selling everything from spices to electronics, young people on their phones navigating a city that's both ancient and trying desperately to be modern. And Baghdad teaches you that cities, like people, carry scars, but they also carry memory. And as long as the Tigris flows, Baghdad remembers when it was the center of the world. 85 kilometers south of Baghdad, on the banks of the Euphrates, lie the ruins of Babylon. For over 1,000 years, this was one of the world's most important cities. Hammurabi ruled from here in the 7th century BCE, creating his famous code of laws. Urbek Bashar are laws carved into a black stone stele, establishing principles like an eye for an eye and protections for the weak. But Babylon's greatest glory came under Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BCE. He rebuilt the city on a magnificent scale. The Ishtar Gate, covered in glazed blue bricks and decorated with golden bulls and dragons, was so beautiful that it inspired awe and fear in equal measure. The Hanging Gardens, which Nebuchadnezzar supposedly built for his wife who missed the green mountains of her homeland, and became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Whether they actually existed remains debated. No archaeological evidence has been found, but the legend persists, speaking to Babylon's reputation for achieving the impossible. The city's ruins reveal remarkable sophistication. The processional way, paved with limestone and lined with walls showing over 100 lions in glazed brick, led from the Ishtar Gate to the Temple of Marduk, Babylon's patron god. The Tower of Babel, mentioned in the Bible, was likely the ziggurat Etemenanki, dedicated to Marduk. It stood about 3 meters tall, visible from great distances across the flat Mesopotamian plain. The structure represented humanity's ambition to reach heaven, though, according to biblical narrative, God confused their languages to stop the construction. So, Babylon fell to the Persians in Wubat Senserjol BCE, when Cyrus the Great diverted the Euphrates River and marched his army into the city along the riverbed. Later, Alexander the Great made Babylon his capital and died there in Sembaik Artersun BCE at age Senshurar, perhaps from fever, perhaps from poison. Over centuries, the city was abandoned. The Euphrates shifted course. Sand and soil buried the ruins. By the time European archaeologists arrived in the 13th century, Babylon was a series of mounds and broken walls. In the Ichen Jobite Bashars, Saddam Hussein, claiming descent from Nebuchadnezzar, ordered Babylon's reconstruction. New walls were built on top of ancient foundations, complete with bricks stamped with Saddam's name in the same style Nebuchadnezzar had used. Archaeologists condemn this as destruction of irreplaceable heritage. During the Arslanlingsan invasion, U.S. and Polish forces established a military base on the ruins. Helicopters landed on ancient pavements. Trenches were dug through archaeological layers. The damage was extensive and, according to UNESCO, irreversible in places. Now, today, Babylon is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, though one still recovering from modern conflicts. The reconstructions from Saddam's era look garish and fake next to the ancient brick. True ruins sit beside these modern fabrications, creating a confusing landscape where distinguishing ancient from recent becomes difficult. Yet standing among the ruins, Looking at the reconstructed Ishtar Gate, the original, is in Berlin's Pergamon Museum. You can still sense the grandeur. This was a city that gave the world the concept of urban planning, that pioneered astronomy and mathematics, that created art and architecture that influenced civilizations for thousands of years. Babylon reminds you that every great civilization eventually falls, but what they create, ideas, art, laws, can outlast empires by millennia. Further south, near the modern city of Assyria, rise the ruins of Ur. This is one of the world's oldest cities, inhabited from the 6th millennium BCE, but Ur's fame rests on two things: its ziggurat and its biblical connection. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, built around Arsene-ibite BCE by King Ur-Nammu, still dominates the landscape. A massive stepped pyramid, it originally rose about centimeters high with 3 staircases meeting at the top, leading to a temple dedicated to the moon god Nana. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, ziggurats did not serve as burial structures. They were symbolic, man-made mountains designed to elevate rituals toward the heavens. Each tier narrowed as it rose, forming the familiar stepped silhouette. Built with a mud brick core and an outer layer of baked brick bonded with bitumen, the structure used an advanced technique that has helped it endure for more than 4 millennia. Mendia, in the 1st century, parts of the ziggurat were restored with modern additions, including new stairways and reconstructed lower sections. While these changes make the site more accessible and visually striking, specialists have criticized the work for altering the original ancient fabric. Yet Ur's importance extends far beyond its architecture. According to long-standing tradition, this city is associated with the early life of Abraham, a central ancestral figure in 3 major religious traditions. From here, he is said to have departed his homeland and journeyed westward, beginning a story that would influence vast portions of human history. Being a building identified as Abraham's house is most likely from a later era and not historically verified. Still, the tradition continues to draw visitors. In Ur, multiple belief systems trace their spiritual beginnings to a single individual who left behind familiarity in response to a higher calling. Malmegian excavations led by British archaeologist Leonard Woolley in the Ichen Jobite Archers and Ichen Jobite Sanchers revealed remarkable royal burial complexes. These graves contained extraordinary gold artifacts, finely crafted jewelry, and evidence of ceremonial practices in which attendants were laid to rest alongside elite figures. Bandia, among the most famous discoveries, were the Standard of Ur, an inlaid wooden object depicting scenes of conflict and daily life, and the Ram in a Thinkit, a sculptural work demonstrating exceptional artistic skill from over Wubat years ago. Today, many of these objects are housed in major museums abroad, including the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum. Iraq has made repeated requests for their return, but like other iconic Mesopotamian artifacts displayed overseas, they remain part of foreign collections. In the present day, the ruins of Ur lie within a tightly controlled area, and access requires special authorization. The ancient ziggurat rises from the desert landscape, encircled by modern barriers, a powerful contrast between deep antiquity and the realities of the modern world. Northern Iraq presents a different picture altogether. The terrain shifts from open plains to hills and rugged mountains, and the population is largely Kurdish rather than Arab. While the region has faced its own challenges, recent decades have brought relative stability and renewed optimism. Memdu, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which has operated with its own governing institutions since the early Ichenjobei Chaucers, represents the closest step towards self-administration the Kurdish people have achieved in modern history. Spread across several Middle Eastern countries, Kurds form one of the largest ethnic groups without an independent nation-state. Mand Erbil, the regional capital, is among the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities. At its heart stands a massive citadel, an artificial mound formed by thousands of years of uninterrupted settlement, rising absolute meters above the surrounding city. Archaeological findings suggest human presence here for at least Loklin years. Mon recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the citadel underwent extensive restoration in the early Arcer-18th century. Walking through its narrow streets reveals layers of time, Ottoman-era homes, medieval foundations, and beneath them, traces of communities older than written records. Beyond the citadel, modern Erbil has expanded rapidly. Shopping centers, hotels, and office towers now surround the ancient core, transforming the city into a regional economic hub. During periods of instability elsewhere in the country, the region maintained relative security, attracting investment and displaced families. The mountains of Kurdistan are among the most striking in the Middle East. The Zagros Range dominates the horizon, with peaks rising above 10 lopide meters. For centuries, these mountains provided shelter and isolation, shaping both lifestyle and culture. Within this terrain, Kurdish communities preserve their language, traditions, and strong sense of autonomy through successive eras of outside rule. Remote villages, often cut off during winter months, became strongholds of cultural continuity. Damendia, the town of Ahmadiyya, perfectly illustrates this geography. Built atop a high plateau with only a single narrow access road, it functioned as a natural fortress. At its summit lies an ancient town where mosques, churches, and synagogues stand side by side, silent testimony to the region's long tradition of coexistence. Halabja stands as a painful reminder of Kurdish suffering. In Ichenju-by-Bashabad, during the closing days of the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein's regime dropped chemical weapons on this Kurdish town. Over Ling people died in a single day, most of them civilians. The Halabja Memorial now commemorates this atrocity, one of the worst chemical weapon attacks against civilians in history. The Kurdish struggle for autonomy and independence has been long and bloody. The Anfal campaign in the late Ichenju-by-Bashars killed between Wushers, Ling and Ibad-Bashars, Ling Kurds. Entire villages were destroyed. Mass graves still being uncovered reveal the scale of the violence. Yet Kurdish culture persists and flourishes. Kurdish music, with its distinctive rhythms and the haunting sound of the tambur, fills wedding celebrations and festivals. Traditional dress, baggy pants, colorful vests, and elaborate head wraps is worn with pride, especially during Nowruz, the Kurdish New Year celebrated on the spring equinox. The Peshmerga, Kurdistan's military force, played a crucial role in fighting ISIS from Artsenling Ishir-Sifu, Artsenling Ishir-T. When Iraqi forces fled from ISIS advances, the Peshmerga held the line, protecting not just Kurdistan, but also religious minorities like the Yazidis. And Kurdistan today represents hope and complexity. Hope because it demonstrates that governance can be stable, and economies can grow even in Iraq. Complexity because its relationship with the central Iraqi government remains fraught. Its Arsenling-e-T independence referendum was rejected by Baghdad, and its borders with Turkey, Iran, and Syria remain contested and militarized. The mountains stand unchanged, indifferent to borders drawn by foreign powers after World War I, and the Kurdish people continue their ancient existence in these highlands, still waiting for a state of their own. In southern Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates converge, lie the Mesopotamian marshes. These wetlands, covering thousands of square kilometers, are believed by some to be the location of the biblical Garden of Eden. For the marsh Arabs known as the Madan, these wetlands have been home for over Uling years. Life here follows patterns set millennia ago. Families live in mudhifs, traditional houses built entirely from reeds. These structures, with their distinctive arch designs, are surprisingly durable and well-suited to the environment. The technique of bundling reeds and bending them to create arches appears in ancient Sumerian art suggesting continuity of practice over Wuling years. The Madan travel by mashuf, narrow canoes, poled through shallow waterways. They raise water buffalo, which provide milk, meat, and dung for fuel. They fish using techniques unchanged for centuries, and they harvest reeds, which serve as building material, fodder, and fuel. The wetlands themselves are a biodiversity hotspot. Millions of birds migrate through, including rare species like the Basra reed warbler and the sacred ibis. The Euphrates soft-shelled turtle, one of the world's most endangered freshwater turtles, survives here. And the ecosystem provides crucial breeding grounds for fish species from the Persian Gulf. But in the İçenjolbay cultures, Saddam Hussein nearly destroyed this ancient landscape. After the İçenjolbay uprisings following the Gulf War, many Madan supported the rebellion. In retaliation, Saddam ordered the marshes drained. Massive projects diverted the rivers, draining over bifided choshers of the wetlands. The environmental catastrophe was also a cultural one. The Madan were displaced. Their way of life, which had persisted for millennia, seemed to be ending. Villages that had existed for generations became dust. After Saddam's fall in Artsenling-San, local people began breaking down the dikes and barriers. Water slowly returned. The marshes began to recover by Artsenling-Chi. About bifided ushers of the original wetland area had been restored. Right in Artsenling-Iserloop, UNESCO designated the Ahwar of southern Iraq. The marshes, along with nearby archaeological sites, as a World Heritage Site, recognizing both the natural importance and the cultural heritage of the Madan. Today, the marshes face new threats. Upstream dams in Turkey, Syria, and Iran reduce water flow. Climate change brings hotter, drier conditions, and political tensions over water rights create uncertainty. Yet the Madan continue. Mudhifs still rise from the waters. Children still learn to pole mashufs through narrow channels. And the wetlands, though diminished, still provide a glimpse of what this land was like when the Sumerians first built cities on its edges. Okay? The marshes remind you that not all civilization is urban. For Wuling years, people have lived in these wetlands, adapting their lives to water and reeds, creating a culture as rich as any city dwellers. Their persistence is its own kind of monument. North of Baghdad, in the city of Samarra, stands one of Iraq's most distinctive structures. The Great Mosque of Samarra, built in the 12th century during the Abbasid Caliphate, was once the largest mosque in the world. Though much of it lies in ruins, its minaret remains the Malwiya Tower, a massive spiral cone rising Wusar meters above the desert. The design is unique. Unlike the typical square or cylindrical minarets, the Malwiya is a continuous spiral. A ramp winds around the outside, ascending to a cylindrical tower at the top. The structure's appearance is so distinctive that it's become an iconic symbol of Iraq. Why the spiral design? Some scholars suggest Mesopotamian ziggurat influence. Others point to Buddhist stupas from the east. Whatever the inspiration, the result is architecture that seems to bridge civilizations and eras. Samarra itself was briefly the Abbasid capital in the 12th century. For about 50 years, it rivaled Baghdad in size and grandeur. Then the caliphs returned to Baghdad, and Samarra declined, leaving behind monuments from its brief moment of glory. The city remains important to Shia Muslims. The Al-Askari shrine contains the tombs of the Surth and Sur'ith Shia imams and is believed to be where the Surith imam, the Mahdi, went into occultation in Babai Tishir Sus CE. For Twelver Shia, the Mahdi remains hidden, awaiting the right time to return and establish justice. In Arsène Lu, the shrine's golden dome was destroyed in a bombing, an attack that sparked a wave of sectarian violence across Iraq. The dome has since been rebuilt, but the incident highlighted the sectarian tensions that continue to affect Iraq. Standing at the base of the Malwiya, looking up at the spiral ascending toward the sky, you're reminded that religious architecture is about more than function. It's about aspiration, the human desire to reach towards something higher, whether you call it heaven, enlightenment, or simply meaning. The Malwiya has survived over years of wars, floods, and earthquakes. It stands as a testament to the Islamic Golden Age, when Samarra was a center of learning and power, when architecture could be both innovative and monumental. Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city, straddles the Tigris River in the north. Just across the river lie the ruins of Nineveh, once the greatest city of the Assyrian Empire. In the 5th century BCE, Nineveh was the largest city in the world, home to perhaps even Arsars, Ling people. King Sennacherib made it his capital, building magnificent palaces decorated with carved reliefs showing battles, hunts, and divine favor. The Library of Ashurbanipal, built in Nineveh around Lubite Wushers BCE, was the first systematically organized library in the world. It contained over Senshur-Ling clay tablets, covering everything from literature to science to administrative records. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest known literary work, was preserved here. When Nineveh fell to the Babylonians and Medes in Lopbai-Isharar BCE, the city was utterly destroyed. Fire consumed the palaces, but paradoxically, the intense heat baked the clay tablets, preserving them. They lay buried for over Wubet years until archaeologists uncovered them in the 13th century. And the Nergol Gate and parts of the city walls still stand. Though they've been extensively reconstructed, the reliefs from Assyrian palaces, showing lions, battles, and kings, are among the finest art from the ancient world, though most are now in the British Museum and the Louvre. Modern Mosul grew on both banks of the Tigris, a major city of over a million people before Arsène Sus. Then ISIS captured it, making it the capital of their so-called caliphate. For 3 years, Mosul endured horrors. Minorities were murdered or enslaved. Cultural heritage was destroyed. The city became a battlefield as Iraqi forces, supported by international coalition, fought to retake it. The Al-Nuri Mosque, with its distinctive leaning minaret known as Al-Hadba the Hunchback, stood for over Babite 6 years. In Arsène Sus, the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared his caliphate from its pulpit. In Arsène, as Iraqi forces closed in, ISIS destroyed the mosque, rather than let it be liberated. The battle for Mosul was devastating. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Thousands of civilians died. The old city, with its narrow alleys and historic buildings, was particularly damaged. Since liberation in Arsène, Mosul has been rebuilding. The Al-Nuri Mosque is being reconstructed with UNESCO support, using the same techniques and materials as the original. Families are returning, markets are reopening, schools are filled with children again, but the scars remain. Buildings still show bullet holes and blast damage. Mass graves are still being discovered, and the trauma of occupation and battle will affect survivors for generations, yet Mosul is resilient. The city has existed for millennia through Assyrian, Persian, Arab, Mongol, Ottoman, and Iraqi rule. It has been destroyed and rebuilt before, and its people, having endured the unimaginable, are determined to restore their city. Mosul teaches you that cities, like people, can survive almost anything if the will to rebuild exists. The question is not whether Mosul will recover, but what it will become, and whether the world will remember or forget what happened here. At the heart of Erbil rises the citadel, a massive tell formed by luling years of continuous human habitation. This is not a natural hill. Every meter of its absolute meter height represents accumulated layers of human activity. Buildings collapsed and built over, roads raised above old roads, generations living on top of generations. Archaeological evidence suggests settlement here dates to at least Wu-Tain BCE, possibly earlier. That means people have lived continuously on this spot for over chilling years, making it one of the longest inhabited sites on Earth. Walk through the citadel's restored sections and you're moving through compressed time. Ottoman-era houses sit on medieval foundations. Beneath them lie Byzantine remains, and deeper still, Assyrian, Akkadian, and pre-literate cultures layer upon layer, and the citadel contains over 80 historic houses, 3 mosques, and a hammam bathhouse. Most are built in the distinctive style of the region: mud brick with wooden balconies, courtyards with gardens, and rooftop terraces. In Artsenling-Chi, the High Commission for Erbil Citadel Revitalization began a massive restoration project. The work is painstaking in preserving original materials where possible, documenting everything, and maintaining the character while making structures safe. One family remained living in the citadel throughout the restoration to maintain the tradition of continuous habitation. When that family eventually moved, another took their place, ensuring the chain remains unbroken. The view from the citadel looks over modern Erbil, shopping malls, hotels, and the sprawl of a rapidly growing city. But from the ancient walls, the perspective shifts. You see not just the present city, but the ghosts of all the cities that existed here before. Erbil's citadel is a physical representation of human persistence. For lotling years, through empires and invasions, through prosperity and decline, people have chosen to live on this hill. Each generation built upon what the previous ones left, creating a monument not to any one civilization, but to civilization itself. Iraq today carries the weight of its past and the trauma of its recent history. The country that invented writing, created the first legal codes, and built the world's first cities has endured decades of war, dictatorship, sanctions, and occupation. The Iran-Iraq War in the İçen Başarısız, the Gulf War in İçen Başarısız, the sanctions throughout the İçen Başarısız, the Arsenling-San invasion, and subsequent chaos, and most recently, the ISIS occupation and the brutal fight to liberate occupied territories. The human cost is incalculable. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced internally and externally, infrastructure destroyed, heritage lost, generations traumatized. The sectarian tensions between Sunni and Shia Muslims, always present but manageable before, were inflamed by the Artsenling-San invasion and its aftermath. The de-Baathification process removed Sunnis from power and governance, creating resentment. The empowerment of Shia political parties, many with ties to Iran, created different resentments, and the space between opened for extremist groups like Al-Qaeda in Iraq and later ISIS. The relationship between the Kurdistan regional government and the central Iraqi government remains tense. The Arsenling-Euphrates Kurdish independence referendum, though it passed overwhelmingly, was rejected by Baghdad and neighboring countries. The dispute over oil-rich Kirkuk and other territories continues. Environmental pressures add another layer of difficulty to the region's challenges. The Tigris and Euphrates, rivers that sustain Mesopotamia for thousands of years, are under severe strain. Large-scale water projects upstream have reduced their flow, while shifting climate patterns bring longer and harsher dry seasons. Inefficient use and pollution further diminish the quality and availability of the remaining water. But yet, Iraq cannot be defined only by hardship. The country possesses vast natural resources that generate significant income, even if structural inefficiencies limit their full benefit. A notably young population, more than half under the age of 25, represents a powerful source of energy and possibility. In recent years, grassroots initiatives and civic movements have increasingly called for transparency, accountability, and meaningful reform. Cultural life in Iraq continues with remarkable resilience. Poetry remains deeply woven into everyday expression, with oral and musical traditions still performed and passed down. Iraqi cuisine, featuring dishes such as grilled river fish, stuffed vegetables, and spiced dumplings, is admired throughout the region. Music, shaped by Arab, Kurdish, and Turkmen influences, produces a soundscape unlike any other. Iraq has long been home to a rich mosaic of religious communities. Over recent decades, many of these groups have seen their numbers decline sharply as families sought safety and stability elsewhere. Ancient traditions that once flourished side by side have been deeply disrupted, altering the social diversity that defined the country for generations. The larger question facing Iraq is whether renewal can extend beyond roads and buildings to the bonds that hold society together. Can communities reconnect after years of separation? Can those who left one day return? Can damaged heritage be recovered, not only in stone but in memory and trust? And can a land that helped shape human civilization chart a more stable future? There are no easy answers. What remains undeniable is that beneath Iraq's soil lie the earliest foundations of urban life. Cities, laws, writing, science, and literature. And above that soil live millions who, despite every challenge, continue to look forward with patience and hope. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Iraq. While creating this exploration, I was reminded again and again of the tragedy of potential unfulfilled and heritage damaged. Beyond the wars and headlines, there is Babylon, where Hammurabi wrote laws that still influence legal thinking today. There is Ur, where Abraham began his journey. There are the marshes where people have lived for oodling years. And there is Kurdistan, where mountains have protected a people still waiting for their state. Iraq is extraordinary. Not just ancient, but foundational. This is where civilization began, where humans first asked the big questions and wrote down the answers. Every invention we take for granted, writing, the wheel, cities, laws, literature, mathematics, either originated here or passed through here. I truly believe its stories deserve to be known, not reduced to conflicts and sectarian violence, but understood as what they are, the stories of the land that made us all civilized. If this journey resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to keep exploring the extraordinary corners of our world, subscribe and join us for the next adventure. To end, I want to honor this wounded land with a line from the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in Iraq over Suling years ago. The life that you seek, you never will find. When the gods created mankind, death they dispensed to mankind, life they kept for themselves. Because Iraq has known death, civilizations have risen and fallen, empires have burned, and people have suffered. But life persists as it has for millennia in the land between two rivers. Discover the world. Explore the extraordinary. See you in the next adventure,